Well, good evening and welcome everyone to the Inaugural Professorial Lecture for Helen Lloyd on what is an outstanding Plymouth evening. So nice to see so many of you made it through the wind and the rain outside. My name is Bob Fern. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Health, and other than overseeing the health and safety information at the start of this process, I don't have a particularly prominent role here. Just to emphasise how important a step this is, ascending to the title of professor is a very significant achievement. It's a lifetime goal for most academics, and congratulations to Helen for achieving that. I'll date myself slightly here because I remember when I was made professor, my young daughters at the time were delighted that their classmates thought I now had a role in the Harry Potter school. And while professors have many talents, casting spells isn't one of them, other than the ability maybe to cast a spell on an audience and entertain and inform. And that's what Helen is going to do this evening. We have a second introduction, a more lengthy introduction from Alison, who's going to step up now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Dr. Ali Norman. I'm from the School of Psychology. I've known Helen for about 6 years now. We met in 2018, where I actually interviewed her for her job in the school. I'm really glad that she came and joined us when she did. We have been firm friends ever since. We've bonded over glasses of wine, but also over topics around social change, very similar interests in our research and personal lives as well. So Helen started her career in archaeology up at UCL, and then went on to do medical anthropology. And I know she's going to talk a lot more about this tonight, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. She tells me that the reason why she was particularly interested in archaeology was the idea of being able to travel the world and potentially a bit of escapism, which I can completely understand. But actually a love of people brought her back to more medical-based research, and eventually has led to her joining us here in sunny Plymouth in the School of Psychology. Normally the weather in Plymouth is better than this, honestly, but today it's decided to demonstrate exactly how bad it can be. So as I was saying, Helen and I have been friends for some time. We've got very similar backgrounds. We both come from working class backgrounds, grew up in fairly adverse conditions of poverty during the 1980s with very limited opportunities for success, but both had a desire to want to make something of our lives. We also share the difficulties that still exist around being a woman in academia, which does bring its own challenges even in the modern day. And we both have a sense of drive and motivation that I think comes from that adversity that we both experienced in our younger years. We also have a real desire to be human, so we have a lot of fun together. As I already mentioned, the wine is definitely a key part of that. Lots of spas and hot tubs, perhaps more, not so many as we would have liked over the years. And we both have an interest in travelling, although I have to say Helen has definitely beaten me on this one. So to borrow Jason's joke from yesterday, the reason everyone has a 52-page passport is because of Helen. So she has been to the West Bank, she's been to Israel, she's been to Australia, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Greece, Slovakia, Poland, France, Spain, Italy, Brussels, Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, India, Maldives, New York, Portugal, Peru, Ecuador, the Galapagos Islands, Antigua, Nevis and St Kitts, the British Virgin Islands, Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands, and she lived in Montserrat for 6 months. You can kill her after the presentation, it's fine. We've also both run a half marathon. I only found this out the other day, and both agreed that we will never, ever, ever do that again. The key difference between the two of us is that, unlike me, Helen is quite creative as well. I don't have a creative bone in my body, whereas Helen apparently is pretty good with theatre set design, which I didn't know until the other day. She also makes jewellery and is good at needle felt, which I also didn't know until the other day. And she's also incredibly good at all things athletics, so she's a good scuba diver and a fantastic rower, as you can see in the picture. We do share a love of cos art, which again I also didn't realise was something that we shared So the picture, in case you can't make it out, because I didn't know when I was leafing through her Facebook profile the other day to get some awful pictures of her, was that this is actually of her dressed up as a druid many, many years ago. On a more serious note, we share a lot in common in terms of our research as well. So Helen and I both share a passion for social justice. We're interested in supporting the inequalities and actually making them more equal in our society, raising the profile and the voice of marginalised groups. We do this in very different ways, but Helen's research has really demonstrated the importance of working closely with individuals on the ground to really get their voices raised in a way that other research just hasn't been able to achieve. We also are big fans of the importance of storytelling within research to be able to actually really emphasise what life looks like for people on the ground. The need to look at human beings as holistic and also part of systems, which I know Helen's going to be talking about at length today, and trying to bring about better levels of social justice through fighting hierarchical systems that exist. Both of us in our research have worked very closely with individuals with lived experience. They are a core part of the work that we do, and I know Helen's going to be talking a lot about that in terms of her own research today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Helen to give her inaugural professorial lecture. Well done, Helen. We're really, really proud of you.
Oh, hello. I'm feeling a little bit nervous now. Okay, so thank you for being here. It's amazing to feel so much support. And I've been told to think about this as a celebration of my work, so that's what we're going to try to do. But what I want to do is create a different flavour for what an inaugural speech might be like, and it's going to be quite personal. I've attended a few in my time, and they do take very different forms. So you're probably going to either love it or hate it, because that's the way people tend to find me. But hey-ho. I'm going to try not to bore you, and I'm going to try not to embarrass my kids too much, I promise. Although I didn't realise everything was going to look this big. The big cyborg at the front was me, yes. So I have a disclaimer, okay? I'm going to be talking about sexual harassment. I'm going to be talking about racism. I'm going to be talking about sexism and classism. So if you feel triggered by any of these things, there's the door. But hopefully you won't. What you're looking at in front of you is a piece of art by Barbara Hepworth, who is one of my all-time favourite artists. This is a polished bronze sculpture. And I think the thing about Barbara, which is amazing, I like to think of her as a friend, so I call her Barbara, is that she was challenging gender norms at a time when women were told to go away and play with little things. She was carving monolithic sculptures that were designed to be placed in an environment out there in the world. And this was because she was interested in what it means to be a human in the world and the tensions between being a human and in the environment that we all live in. And this is something that I've really been fascinated with over the course of my career. So if you haven't been down to her house and gardens in Cornwall, you must definitely go. The other thing that's really important about her is that she's totally inspirational in many ways, but she spent a lot of time drinking whiskey and smoking cigars well into her early 70s. So if I make it that far, I plan to do exactly as she has set this trail. So this is a piece called The Sun. And what was really interesting about her work is it often experimented with different types of materials. So you can see a bronze circle with apertures and lots of tensions in the wires. And what this describes for her is the emotions that she felt when she was in the environment and the way that it made her feel. What's also really amazing about her work is that you can look at any Barbara Hepworth piece, look at the apertures that she creates, and whatever way you look through it, you'll see a different version of reality. And this nicely sums up how I approach the world around me, particularly in research. So I talk about critical realism, and this is a philosophical stance. This is a posh word in science for what we believe truth to be. My philosophical stance is that we can all agree that there are some truths. We can all see a disc in front of us that represents something golden, right? But whatever aperture we look through, we might see a slightly different version of reality. And that, to me, nicely describes critical realism, and that's the methodological, ontological position that I've taken into all of my research. So, I've got a broad audience here. I've got some young people, some academics and some non-academics, and I hope I'm going to be able to talk to you in a way that makes sense to all of you. But if you're a bit bored, you can always look at Facebook and all the memes about Rishi Sunak that are going on at the moment, because they've kept me entertained for a very long time. But before I go forward, because I was really worried that I might skip this slide, I want to talk about some of the most amazing students that I work with who are utterly inspirational to me. One of the best things about my job is supervising and working with students. And I've got some declin students here, some PhD students, some undergraduates and some master's students. They're all doing amazing self-driven projects looking at the role of art and nature for asylum seekers and refugees, people with dissociative identity disorder, people with obesity and long-term conditions, the role of women in mental health, and a whole range of other projects in between. And it's part of my job that I love the most, I think, when it comes to education, because we blend education and research together, and they inspire me so much. So these are some of the truly inspirational people, the future leaders that I hope I'm going to be sitting here if I make it to 70 with my whiskey and cigar, watching them doing their professorial talk. But before we continue, I'm going to just talk through some definitions. So I made this fancy talk, didn't I, to try and get you all in the room. Entwined systems, so I'm going to try and deliver on that, but entwined systems are things that are codependent and relational to one another. And that's what I'm going to try and talk to you about today, and how important that is for health and well-being. So if we take the analogy or the idea of a tree and a root and a soil system, these two things are deeply important to one another in order to survive. I believe, and there's a whole heap of research that shows us that as social beings, we need a sense of health and place in society and to be valued. But we also need to be healthy in order to engage in social relationships. So we are these bio-psycho-social embodied people. Yeah, we are a combination of psychological, physical, functional systems and social systems. And we need all of those things to be kind of working for us to live and fulfill really happy lives. So that's what I mean when I talk about biopsychosocial. When I talk about equitable solutions, I'm talking about something that is a solution to a problem that holds mutual benefit for everybody that takes part. And that's where I've ended up in my career in terms of the research that I'm doing. When I talk about structural forces, I'm talking about the things that we somehow hold immense force in our lives, but that we don't really have a huge amount of control over. So things like education, policy, health policy and policing, okay? So these things are really important for our health and well-being, and I hope I'm going to demonstrate that to you today. So this is a little bit about me. I'm a professor of social and cultural psychology. I'm a social scientist and an interdisciplinary researcher, so I've done lots of different things, and that gives an uneasy sense of not belonging, but I think that's okay, and I think that's really benefited me. And helped me to be brave in my research career. And you do need to be brave, and you do need to have quite a thick skin. So I'm a mixed methodologist, which again is a very posh word for someone who likes to bring together numbers and stories to understand complex health and social problems, but also solutions, or what we call interventions. I'm interested in how we understand the world around us and communicate that, and how we can use that knowledge to help people feel better, feel happier, and co-design really important interventions to address some of the really tricky, thorniest problems that we have in society, particularly around social inequality, which is more prevalent now than it's ever been. I'm going to try not to be political. I'm really interested in knowledge systems. So one system of knowledge we have is a Western allopathic medical system of knowledge, which is based on the sort of medicine that we experience every day when we go to the hospital. But we have other knowledge systems around us. We have Ayurvedic systems, we have Chinese medical systems, we have our own lay experiences of what it means to be health healthy and unhealthy. And I'm interested in those competing different knowledge systems. And I'm really interested in working with people in co-production to make things better in the world out there, not just in the academy. I'm interested in creating a conversation about holding organisations responsible for some of the really harmful behaviours and activities and policies that they drive. And the people that inevitably suffer the worst from those decisions, those political, corporate decisions, are the people that are most vulnerabilised and most marginalised in society. And so I'm really interested in trying to work out how we can make those systems accountable. I'm not going to talk about P3C research because it's coming, and I'm going to come back to epistemic injustice. But I'm now going to talk to you about what I think are entwined systems. So what you can see in front of you is Bronfenbrenner's ecological model of social systems. This model has guided me from the sort of mid-90s in my research career. We do not exist in a vacuum. We're not just the person in the middle without influence from all these other things around us. So the attitudes and social norms and the cultural systems in that broader outer circle really influence the sort of things that are produced in the political social service spheres. Okay, so our ideas of mental health, of what's criminal behaviour, are all coloured by our social norms and cultural norms, and they feed into policies, which feed into this kind of mesosystem and microsystem, where we learn, we grow, we make relationships, and we have the potential to either thrive or to not thrive. So this ecological systems model is incredibly important for understanding inequality and ill health in society. So we're going to come back to this later. But the way that this is going to play out, and this is a bit of a gamble, is that I'm going to try and do the rest of this talk in a narrative form. And this is because, and I've even forgotten all my notes, hold on, I've got to catch up now. Why have I decided to do this? I've decided to do this because for a long time, all the way through my career, I have been asking people to tell me their stories. And as researchers, we're a little bit reticent about telling our own stories. What does that do? That puts us into positions of power. We withhold our knowledge of ourselves, but we expect everybody to tell each other and tell us these really important things. So I'm going to tell you my story. And it's going to fall over 3 acts. I'm quite creative, you know. So we've got Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. We've got a climax there, and I think that's me here now, which suggests it can only get worse. Decrepitude. Anyway, the reason why I'm really interested in narrative is because it has this enduring human potential to shape and create action. It's how we make meaning of our life. It's how we understand ourselves. It's how we connect to other people. So it's an incredibly important tool for research, but also a massively important tool for the world around us. We are furnished with narratives all around us, okay? And it's much more preferable than me just standing here quoting loads of statistics at you, even though I know they're really important, right? So narrative is also really important for therapeutic interventions because we learn about ourselves when we start talking about ourselves. And in the course of the preparation of this speech, I've actually learned to appreciate myself a lot more and say some really, really positive things about myself that I've never, ever said before, such as, you're actually a bit awesome. I've never, ever said that in public before. Here we go, here's my story. Oh, and a spinning arrow. So this is my microsystem. This is me as a baby and as a little girl, me with my mum when my mum was 20, me and my brother who's online somewhere looking pretty glum. We hated having our picture taken. The other picture of me is of my dad and his brothers and sisters, and I think some of my cousins are also online. And my dad was 17 when I was born. 17. I was born in 1973 in North London, and I was told I was an accident. It was the 80s. People didn't mince their words back then. And my parents were actively discouraging people to give me compliments because they didn't want me to be arrogant or have a big head. So I remember that. They weren't being mean, it was just the way things were. They were teenage parents of Scottish, Irish, English mix. They'd both suffered incredibly adverse childhoods with alcoholism, violence, and joblessness. And they were babies themselves. So my childhood and our childhood would definitely be described as adverse. And there might have been, I think there's 7 or 8 key domains on the ACEs list, which is what we call adverse childhoods. I think we were hitting 5 of them constantly. And this is really, really important because currently, right now in the UK, 1 in 4 children suffer from adverse childhood experiences. So I was one of those. And these experiences impact your life chances and your health over time. Growing up in an unsafe environment puts you at risk of developing really poor health outcomes. It speeds up the process of disease, which speeds up the process of mortality. And we know in parts of Scotland, people die 10 years younger than parts of England. And it's been worse after this amount of time on a Conservative government. Sorry. But we are going to get a change coming soon, hopefully. So research on ACEs have demonstrated that children who experience them are more likely than their similar age peers to experience challenges in biological, emotional, social and cognitive functioning. We had no money. There was no family holidays. I lived on hand-me-down clothes. And this isn't a sob story. This is just a reality for 1 in 4 children right now in the UK. We relied on government handouts, and I remember Mum queuing for food. She worked 3 jobs. So my parents worked as hard as they could when they could, but there just wasn't the opportunities there for them. One of my earliest memories, which I'm not going to go into in a great amount of detail, was very, very traumatic. And it involved seeing the impact of this life on my mother's mental health. And that has never, ever left me. But it left me feeling very confused and bewildered. But hey, it was the 80s and we had Top of the Pops. This sense of bewilderment, combined with a keen sense of curiosity, was catalyst for a continuous questioning of the world around me. And I don't think it was easy parenting me. Apparently, I was a complete nightmare. I shredded my mother's nerves on many occasions. And my memories, well, that I'm told, was that I used to climb on anything that was possibly around me and catapult myself off from wardrobes onto whatever surface I could find myself, often without a soft landing. So I was covered in bruises and anti-climb paint for my childhood. That's what I remember. But I wanted to fly. I wanted to see if I could fly. But it was the late 1780s and 70s and 80s, not 1780, although my kids would like to believe that I'm that old. It was the 70s and 80s, and the only books in the house was like on transcendental meditation, because my parents were total hippies. But we had a healthy diet of TV and music, and many of the films that I was drawn to were these sort of films: adventure, time travel. I just wanted to escape. And they fueled this imagination and questioning that I developed over my childhood. Escapism was a really key feature. But I was also developing this growing awareness that we had much less than other people around us. And with that, a really increasing sense of shame, that we were not good enough, that we were bottom of the pile. State-funded holidays were welcome when they came, but they just served to show us that we had much less than everyone else and we were at the bottom of the pile. I've worked in some capacity since the age of 11, and this was necessary to afford just the basic things that I needed to. So thanks for the red box, Jason, because there is serious impoverishment in that area. So, moving on into adolescence, there were some complicating actions and plots. Those of you who've done a structural analysis using a Lebovian framework will get that nerdy reference. But this was a pivotal moment in my life. So we moved from Camden to Kennington. And you can see that this is the Northern Line. Londoners are just obsessed with the tube. We live our lives by it. We didn't actually move that further down the Northern Line, but we moved from IMD4 to IMD3. Now, the index of multiple deprivation is a neighbourhood score of how deprived an area is. And it's normally based on around, I think it's about 1,500 households. So there's what they called as super output areas. We moved from 4 to 3. There are, as it says here, one is the most deprived in the whole of the UK, to 32,844. So I thought we were moving to a relatively middle class area to a relatively poor area, but actually we were moving from one set of deprivation issues to another. And it was absolutely devastating. I hated it. Hey ho, we got a 3-bedroom house, we could see Big Ben, we could see all the people that were making decisions about us but had no control or power. But it was the 80s and we were challenging the systems around us. We were challenging inequality and apartheid in South Africa. One of my earliest memories is listening to this. And see signs that says no blacks, Irish, no dogs, right? This was still happening. Heavily divided society, heavily racist, but also very challenging, and a lot of fusion in arts and culture. And we had women challenging what it meant to be a woman in popular culture, and we had people challenging what it meant to be black, and there was uprisings. The Brixton riots happened literally as we moved to Kennington. I was there in 1985. I saw the rioting. I was on a sleepover. I thought it was amazing, actually. It was the best entertainment I've had for a while. But this was an outward questioning of police brutality. It was a really important movement. And this provided me with great strength and a sense of kind of direction to question the world around me. I've stumbled across this video. It's basically my old secondary school, which I moved to in South London. So I'm going to play this for a bit. Context, it was made into a community centre after it closed.
So this is, when we first came, this is where it still looks like it did back in 2005. It's a massive area. I mean, it's 4.5 acres, which is unheard of. We're a stone's throw from the Houses of Parliament and from the South Bank and everything else. And this was sitting here, which was unbelievable. Our key thing was really about what do we do about the long-term development of this community. So when we looked at what the big issues were, the big issues were social isolation. The big issues were about confidence, developing confidence. The big issues were about the gangs. How do you break that down?
1 in 4 children in the UK are still living with these kind of experiences. And the school was closed down because, not because Oliver Letwin famously said he'd rather die than send his children there. It was closed down because it was just shocking. It was one of the worst schools in the UK. And then the site was made into a community centre, and now it's being refurbished into really lovely flats for the private sector. So again, people are not going to benefit from it. But it was pretty depressing. But there were some amazing teachers at Lillian Baylis who really fueled my ecosystem of pivotal moments. And one of the things I really remember when I started taking my GCSE sociology was thinking about challenging big corporations. And one of the first essays I ever wrote was to challenge Nestlé's marketing of baby powder to Africa, which was resulting in widespread infant mortality. I was 14 and I was so angered by this that I wrote a letter to Nestlé. They didn't get back to me, obviously. But we were told to challenge, and I don't think school is doing that now, unfortunately. I think it's crushing people's ability to challenge and funneling them into certain types of discourses and challenging. But I was then set to become an investigative journalist. And I just want to put a big shout out to Mr. B, who was one of those mentors in my life. And I honestly think that Mr. Burton at school, if it hadn't been for him, I probably wouldn't have gone and done A-levels. He was there supporting me all the way, encouraging me, showing me compassion, gentleness and encouragement, and giving me a safe space. He used to let me come and revise at his house, and him and his wife used to cook me dinner when I was doing my GCSEs to escape the chaos of my 4 siblings. And safety wasn't something that I felt at school. I was constantly worried about being bullied and had a number of occasions of being totally kicked in by gangs of kids. So that safe space was a really important moment for me. And he would make us laugh. Kids loved him. We'd hang out in his room and play board games. So thank you, Mr. Burton. You're watching now. We've unfailingly sent each other a Christmas card every year since 1989. I love you. But my response was to fight back, and I have developed a really tremendous drop kick. But this was usually in response to boys trying to grope me or sexually harass me. So I used to fight back. But what I did get at Lillian Bayliss was an opportunity to channel this bad girl vibe and go on some really good experiences of work experience. And what you can see is the South London Press. So education for me has been one of those fundamental things that have got me here today. So with all this enthusiasm and wonder about the world, I took myself off to Kingsway Princeton to do A-levels to become a journalist. And I think here is where I experienced my first setbacks of being told you're not good enough. I already believed that and internalised it, but I was told explicitly by one of my communications studies A-level teachers, I wish I could remember her name, that I was never going to be good enough to be a journalist. This was absolutely crushing for me. And I went back crying, I think, and I remember speaking to Mr. Burton and some of my other teachers who gave me a book about Masada. Now, Masada is a really interesting site in Israel, and I've visited there 3 times already. And it's where the Zealots held out to Romans in about the 1st century AD. They hauled themselves up there and resisted Roman occupation. I fell in love with this book. I wanted to escape. And so I enrolled in a course in archaeology. And what you can see in front of you is my friend Jen and my friend Vic, who's tuning in from Japan and the States. This is us in Hall's residence. That was me on my 2nd ever archaeological excavation in Syria. And one of my really good friends, my oldest pals, is in the audience today. You'll be able to spot him after I've shown this picture. Revenge for the speech at my wedding. And this is the Institute of Archaeology. And I had a great fun. And I was determined to be the female version of Indiana Jones. But there were further experiences of sexual harassment, usually by male lecturers. And this becomes really wearing over time. So I had a new passion and a new drive, but it wasn't to be. When I finished university, I was saddled with debt because of the system back then. I was at that point where people had to take out loans. I worked all the way through my degree and still managed to get in a heaps amount of debt, basically because I was helping support my mum at home with my younger siblings. And if you want to be an archaeologist in the UK, correct me if I'm wrong, you still need to volunteer for quite a significant amount of time without pay. I just couldn't afford to do this. So I got a job in a pub in Whitehall, which I was subsequently sacked from for throwing a pint of beer over someone because I was groped by somebody from the MOD. I didn't have a job, but I was lucky enough to get a job at Imperial College, which is the paper you can see up in the corner, which was collecting narrative histories of people that were dying from mesothelioma, which is an asbestos-induced severe lung cancer, which shouldn't have been happening. So there was a ban on an importation of particular types of asbestos fibre that we knew private companies were still doing. So part of this job was to collect tissue samples of people that had already died, but also interview people that were dying to identify where it was they were exposed to asbestos. So this reignited my kind of sense of social justice and narrative as being really important. And I got to travel all around the UK, which was fabulous. Got to keep up with my notes again. So this growing interest that I was developing in the kind of social context of ill health and the role of structural forces and health inequalities was becoming really important. I was thinking about the wider social political systems and how that impacted really closely on people's mortality and on people's lives. It was at this time I also did a medical anthropology master's degree, which introduced me to this idea that there are different types of knowledge. We live and work in a particular type of knowledge, which is based on Western philosophical and medical values, but there are so many other ways of thinking about the world. And I was able to do this because of Tom Barnes, who again was another one of those key actors and players in my life. He was my supervisor, manager, when I managed a multi-centre randomised controlled trial of drug treatments for severe schizophrenia, and he helped fund my master's degree through Imperial College and allowed me the time off of working full-time to undertake my master's degree. So without Tom's encouragement, guidance and support, my super ally at that time, I definitely wouldn't be here. But again, there were experiences of sexual harassment. There were people who would routinely ask me on telephone what I was wearing. So this continued, and it really started to get to me. But I moved on, and I went and managed to secure a DPhil position at the University of Oxford in psychiatry and medical anthropology, where I attempted to get anthropologists to talk to psychologists and psychiatrists. Yeah, that was difficult, and I can't say I was happy, actually, when I was doing my degree, my doctorate at Oxford. I didn't belong, I didn't fit in, and I was actually really depressed for a long time whilst I was there. And I don't know whether it was my insecurity at the time of coming from a very impoverished background, or whether it's just because it is a bloody hard system for everybody, but it was not easy. However, I survived because I spent a lot of time in London, in Southall, hanging out with the Punjabi and Sikh population, getting fat and eating curries. But it did produce some amazing research to try and understand the kind of ethnic, social, clinical, and how those variables combined in that kind of systems approach to influence outcome in schizophrenia. So it was a matched cohort study with white British families and second-generation Punjabi Sikh families. But it was not a particularly happy time until I finished and had my babies. And these are really important systems of micro support. They're going to kill me. So Oxford was full of happy times and joy and support and laughter. It wasn't all hard and depressing. And these people have really sustained me through my life. I love you all, and I'm very, very proud of you. But what about Mia pulling her brother in a trolley? That doesn't seem to be very fair, does it? Hey-ho. I've got lots of allies. Some of you are in the room, and I apologise for the photo. But without these microsystem supports, we don't get through the hard times. And when asylum seekers and refugees come to this country, they lose all of this. They have nothing. So what we need to be doing as a compassionate society is providing opportunities and avenues for social connection, and that's what I'm going to get onto in a moment. I'm not going to name check you all because you know who you are. But thank you. It's been an incredibly hard couple of years, and I wouldn't have got through it without you. I love you lots. So back to the science and research bit. I was so thoroughly annoyed with the Academy of Oxford that I decided to leave and set up my own company called Isis Green, which was a non-for-profit company that tried to directly commission and work with Department of Health and a variety of mental health and social care trusts. And one of the things I'm most proud of during that time, which was really hard work, was the Sub-21 project, where I hung out with street drinkers. I felt quite at home. They were quite young, though. I wasn't street drinking at the age of 11, I don't think. And I got to learn about why they were doing the things they were doing and co-create an intervention with them to develop a solution. This involved looking through these different sets of the microsystem, mesosystem, and macrosystem to engage private companies, the police, health and social care providers, and off licenses that were selling booze to young kids. We got them all around the table, and we created a solution which saw a 30% reduction in street drinking within the first 6 months. So it's amazing what you can do outside of the academy. But then I got really annoyed by the fact that I couldn't access papers and had to pay for them. Not just that, but I did miss going to university and being part of a system. So I did go back to the academy and again got really, really annoyed by the fact that I was being pushed sideways because I'd had maternity leave. And how dare I, as a woman in academia, think that you could possibly progress after having 2 children in Oxford? And I was famously told that who did I think I was, one of the FTSE 100 leaders, to think that I could actually think about promotion in the Oxford system after having babies. So I went for some more escapism, and we decided to rent out our house in Oxford and live on the tiny island of Montserrat for 6 months, where I did all this fancy creative stuff that really made me consider what I wanted to do with my life. I did do set design, I did learn to make jewellery, but I really thought about time with my kids and what I wanted to do when I came back to the UK. And Shamarel, one of my friends who's no longer with us, told me one day, she said, "You are going to be amazing. You just need to know where to put your energy. And sometimes you just need to have time out to think about what it is you really want to do." But I realise I'm talking too long and I'm really running out of time, so I'm going to move on. But we're on Act 3, you'll be pleased to know. And this is when I came to Plymouth. I took up a job as research fellow at Penn Art. Richard's over there in the audience, I can see you. And this was transformational for me. I was part of an opportunity to develop a whole programme of research that was centred around person-centred care. So a form of approach to a person that values equity and the person's strengths. And it was at this time that my mentor, Nikki Britton, who's now retired and has become a climate activist, took me under her wing and really, really supported the development of my career. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Nikki. But this was an amazing opportunity to bring together participatory methods, a whole range of mixed methods, approaches to really deal with some of the most difficult things that we were learning about in the Southwest with the way that care was being delivered for people with multiple long-term conditions. So this is a brief slide that talks about the philosophical underpinning of person-centeredness, which is really important to our study that we're developing at the moment and our intervention that we're developing at the moment in the Roots to Wellness project for refugee and asylum seekers. So it's based on viewing society in a different way. It's based on thinking about societies as resources, as storehouses of capabilities, not just people with deficits and problems, which we're all sometimes told to believe by the popular press. So it's based on this idea that we all have the potential to fulfill the life that we want to, and that we have strengths and resources and capabilities that can be brought to the fore through working in partnership with other people, because we are so dependent on social interaction. Our brains have developed to be social brains. So person-centred care is a way of viewing a human in the context of their life and looking at all the things that shape their health and illness, the barriers that are systemic in the environments they live, and the things that you can bring to the fore to help them reach their potential. So it's based on this idea that when you meet another human being, you approach them with unconditional positive regard, you're reflective, and you try to understand where your biases are and where those biases might tend to bring you to make assumptions about somebody. Here's just some boring stuff, but it's all the evidence about why we should be doing this. This is why person-centred care works. There's loads of controlled trials, and this is even out of date. So why is it important to treat other people with respect and dignity, not just in our clinical encounters and our social encounters and in the academy, but also in the world around us? It's because this is the way that we understand and can start as human beings to tackle what we see as injustice in the world. And Miranda Fricker has talked about this idea of epistemic injustice. I'm not going to play the video because we're going to run out of time. But it's based on this idea that every interaction we have is really, really important with another person, particularly when you're vulnerable and you're in a health situation, as I've been in this week, where being kind is not enough. You need to understand that person and think about what capabilities and resources they have, okay? So it breaks down to 2 types of injustice. There's hermeneutical injustice, a big posh word, which I will explain, and testimonial injustice. So testimonial justice is where a person doesn't listen and jumps to conclusions about someone else. And this happens a lot in healthcare. We know best, We've got the power, we're the doctors. And they stop themselves from listening to what the person really has to say and what they really need to say. And hermeneutical injustice is understanding what's going on about you in the world around you. Now, if you lack resources to understand what's going on with your life, because you've not been in those situations, and then you are in a clinical encounter where you're not heard, there's this vicious cycle between a testimonial injustice and a hermeneutical injustice. And we have societies and groups that just don't understand what's going on with them, not because they lack the capacity to do so, but they've not been in the situations that have been empowering enough in clinical settings to allow them to do that. So this is a really important philosophical underpinning that allows us to understand how those kind of micro interactions that we're all part of feeds into this broader system of injustice. Okay, now here's a fancy intellectual model, right? So back to Bronfenbrenner, you can see that what I'm trying to do here, and it doesn't matter that you don't understand or see all these things. What I'm trying to express is that in every encounter, particularly in clinical encounters with vulnerable individuals, the practitioner, whoever they might be, from whatever discipline they might be, they bring all these other factors. They're probably unconscious to them at the time they're having that interaction. They're burnt out and they're tired. The person brings all their social context with them as well. And that critical juncture can be the meaning of whether that person engages or not engages in treatment, in health, in education, in social welfare, in anything. So if that critical juncture goes wrong, we lose people. And that's why understanding how we are in these really micro interactional situations is really important. We did some theory, we're academics, and you can read about it if you want. But now we're going to get to the really interesting stuff. So this is the thing that I'm the most proud of at the moment, and I have the most amazing team, Lloyd and Wenyu, Sana. If it wasn't for you, I don't know what I'd do, because you keep this project going. But this is a funded project by the NIHR. We have wider collaborators. It's super exciting. We have been working in co-production. We have a peer support worker in the audience to develop a mental health support model in the community, which is peer-led and peer-delivered and peer-designed. That is, people with lived experience of this thing, refugee and asylum-seeking mental health, has been developed and prioritised and made with these people. So here's a quick overview of the process. It's a 36-month project. We managed to get £800,000 out of the NHS to do it, which is incredible for this type of participatory experience-based co-design, because it used to be the dirty word in the gold standard of health research for a very long time. This is the process. We talked to people, we understood their life and their social context. We then worked with them to develop the intervention over, how many workshops have we done now? 7. And then Gloucester, in Plymouth and Gloucester. And we're now testing it in a feasibility style trial with more science. There we go, look, some nice arrows. And we're going to show you a video now, and I can stop talking. I think it shows you the power of co-design, and we haven't even got to we've just started the feasibility study, and we've already impacted positively on people's lives, as we have been impacted positively by those that we've worked with. I have nothing more to say. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Friends, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you would all like to join me just from the bottom of our hearts in thanking Helen for such an engaging, vibrant and challenging talk. That really has been wonderful. If I may abuse my position with the microphone, I would also just, on a personal note, like to thank you for continuing to inspire me as an early career researcher. And I really do aspire towards your epistemic humility, your expertise, and the depths of your generosity. Can we thank Helen again for that, my friends? Okay, so I now have the easiest job of the evening, which is attempting to read. So what I'm going to do now, my friends, is to draw from the questions which have come through on the Slido app. As other questions do occur to you, feel free to either put them up or raise your hand if you'd like to participate in real time. If I can just beg this of you, my friends, we've got lots of people joining us remotely, and the only way that they'll be able to hear your fantastic question if you ask it in the room is if you wait until the microphone gets to you. So without further ado, I'll start with the first question. How did your early life experiences, training in archaeology, or family of origin influence your research? And then in brackets, I'm so proud of you.
Jennifer Lukisis, I know this is your question all the way from Washington. I think I've explained it in the presentation. It's drive, isn't it? And a constant questioning and just wanting to have a tiny little part in making it all a little bit better. Sorry, that's well cheesy, isn't it? I'd get a kick in for that back in South London. I think I've explained it. I don't even think I have to say any more. But I'll stay here for maybe a next question.
Lovely, and we've got a question in the room. We'll get a mic to you right away, my friends.
Very loud.
If we could wait for the mic, then we can include our friends online. Thank you.
If we were in the year 3000, what do you think we'd dig up of today from where we're living now? And
Hell, a lot of bloody plastic. I don't think there'll be much to dig up because I think we'll have obliterated the planet. Sorry. But if we carry on the way we're going, there's not going to be much left.
Okay, I'll take another question from the pad.
On that positive note.
In what ways do the experiences of the participants in your research shape your future research?
I find it very hard to imagine doing research in any other way, in any other paradigm now that I work with people, because it's not only the right thing to do and creates impact through doing it rather than waiting for it to be published and then potentially or not implemented by a government. You get to meet people and that keeps you fresh and active and you learn new things. You learn things about yourself. And you can do that robustly and scientifically. So I don't, there's always going to be the need for experiments and for systematic reviews and for everything else. But this is the most rewarding way of doing research for applied health and social problems. I can't imagine doing it any other way.
Thank you. How much does creativity shape your current work?
Massively, massively. We create something new every time, whether that be knowledge or a storyboard or something that's an artifact. And my work with Sana, it was one of the catalysts for this, the Mapping Memories project, where I was just there as a kind of bystander, really, to watch these amazing people reconstruct their memories through three-dimensional maps of kind of displacement. And that process of engaging with something artistic allows us to think, to feel, to be in a different mode of being. And that in itself feeds into the research experience. So art and science, to me, have always been deeply entwined.
Yeah. Oh, this one isn't from me, but what one piece of advice...
Was that from you, that last one?
Huh?
Was that from you?
No. Yeah, you'll see why I said that. Which one piece of advice would you give an early career researcher who wants to be as impactful and inspirational as you are?
God, I'm going to blush. Find allies, find your mentors, and make sure that you are working within your passion and you need to work out who your foes are and avoid them. I'm not going to go into that right now, but if anyone wants to catch me later, I'll give you a nice example. Choose your mentors and your referees, particularly when you're going for a professorial application, really carefully.
Oh, these are good. Okay. In your research career, how have you learned to challenge power dynamics within the relationships around you, both with colleagues and people with lived experience?
By being quite gobby, by being fearless, trying to push methodologies that give that put people in the centre of it so that their voices can be heard. And the P3C programme that I worked on with Richard was really key to that. Working collaboratively with people will always provide the potential to readdress the power balances, but sometimes you just need to call it out, tell it what it is, and work out that you're never going to work with that person again.
How should the next government address systemic barriers to health?
Get me in post. I've got some pointers. We've got a strategy, our little policy bus. We're going to take it around the UK, banging on doors of Parliament. We've got some strategy on that.
Well, that feeds us very nicely into the next two questions, which I'll ask together. What's Act 4? What's Act 4 have in order? What's next? What is next for Professor Helen Lloyd?
I need to leave you on a cliffhanger. Like all good shows. Who knows? We're hoping to develop the Routes to Wellness project in a multi-centre case study implementation site across the UK. I have designs for Europe. I've just been told that I've got a visiting professorship at the University of Sydney who are really interested in doing some similar work out there. So global domination. Global equity, I don't know, something like that. With my team of people.
Right, I think we can squeeze.
I can't
two
afford it on a
more in.
professorial salary, though, to be fair.
Thank you for an insightful and passionate talk. What advice would you give to a mature someone who is trying to become an academic researcher?
Don't think of yourself as mature. Think of yourself as at the beginning of a journey, and you're only as old as you feel. So just pretend to be young. That's what I do quite a lot, much to my kids' disdain and embarrassment. And my friends will testify.
And a lovely question to round us off. As academics, we often work in disciplinary silos, but are regularly encouraged to reach out and work across disciplines. How have you overcome the challenges of this in your own work?
You have to like who you work with, and you have to find those people irrespective of what discipline they're in, and you have to find something that you have in common, and you have to laugh. If you can crack a joke with somebody and laugh with them, you will work with them productively, you will have a good time, and I actually think that connection over humour is really important. I'm always making really bad jokes. If you laugh, you're in. If you don't, you're out.
Friends, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests, once again, I give you the fantastic Professor Helen Lloyd.
Y hoy quiero expresar mi gratitud de haber sido parte de este importante proyecto, que es una iniciativa de la Universidad de Plymouth, un proyecto de peer support.
So Roots to Wellness project, it's aimed creating a new way of providing mental health support to refugee and asylum seeker and create a peer support worker. That peer support worker will have experience of seeking asylum or being a refugee, and they will be trained mental health and support people who have arrived more recently to the UK.
Quite often people who have suffered forced displacement won't access traditional services, statutory or non-statutory services, because of stigma or issues of mistrust or language difficulties. So people told us very strongly that they wanted to be able to interact with people who understood from their own experiences what forced displacement felt like, and to be able to offer them low-level support in the community to help them overcome some of the difficulties they were experiencing.
Generally, asylum seekers and refugees in a hard situation, so this make them unhealthy, this break their mental health. So this kind of resurgence is important for them. To make decision is hard actually to be refugee, because all life is changing. We go in a road and all life is changing. We can estimate something difficult. Maybe we can thought we can handle it. This time could be more long. We need more to be patient against the life. To be patient was challenging, and to make decision to be a refugee itself was challenging.
Roots Wellness is based on an action-based paradigm where you work actively with people to understand and problem solve. So we're harnessing the potential of the people providing services, the people that are potentially going to experience the service and their lived experience, and us as academic researchers to develop the intervention. So we view a person in a lens of cultural humility, recognizing that they have strengths and capabilities and resources. And we work within that positive framing to help them understand what they need in their life to help them thrive in the community. And so the peer support worker model is based on working with someone's story, understanding them as a person, and all the multifaceted elements of their identity that make them who they are.
It's based on a relational approach to co-design and a relational approach to research and a relational approach to patient and public involvement and engaging with services. So we're focused from the start on building relationships through showing our partners that we're genuinely interested in what they do and the knowledge that they bring. It isn't purely about us as researchers kind of pulling information from them, but that it's more of a two-way conversation where we learn and they learn, and together we create something new that wouldn't have looked like that if one group wasn't there.
And we have talked to them in informal settings, in community settings, but also then through a method which is called experience-based co-design, we've brought them together in workshops. And these workshops have been held in the university by and large. And we've designed the workshops around how to make the peer support worker be most integrated in the ideas of those people and how it will fit best into this context. And we've done that in Plymouth and in Gloucestershire.
نحن من أول ما جينا لهون كان في عنا مثلا مشاكل، نحس حالنا ما لنا مسموعين، ما لنا منشافين بعالم غريب ما بيشبهنا نهائيا.
هلا هو المشروع نحن يعني إنه أنا حبيت المشاركة فيه لأنه نحن من خلال تجاربنا حنفيد اللاجئين أو الأشخاص اللي ما بيعرفوا هون يعني إشي جديد على هالبلاد.
بالبداية يعني حبيتونه يعني تعرفنا على أشخاص من مختلف القوميات، وثاني شيء زي حبينا يعني هون هذا المشروع يعني للتعاون، عن نتعاون.
كيف طريقة التعامل مع الناس من جميع النواحي، سواء من الناحية الصحية سواء من ناحية الأمراض النفسية، وكيفية التعامل مع الشخص، وحتى خذينا تجارب بالقصص.
The project changed my perspective. I saw that to be more careful and to care people, to people who experienced refugees and asylum seekers. This situation could affect people differently.
في الظروف اللي عم تقطعي فيها، ثاني شيء تتقبلي الآخرين بأفكارهم بمعتقداتهم، نتعامل مع الشخص كإنسان عم يمر بظرف مشكلة، ونحن هون لحتى نساعد بعضنا بغض النظر عن أي شيء. يعني أي شيء
حلوة لأن أنا سمعت ناس كتير شو وجعها. أنا كنت مفكرة حالي بس أنا هيك بس ما بقدر أحكي إنه أنا بيجاني هذا الشيء أو أنا هذا كتير قاهرني وما بقدر أحكي لأنه خاف الناس تقول إنه أنا مكبري القصة أو أنا إنه كتير محملي الموضوع وما بده هالقد. فلما سمعت غيري حكى قدرت أحكي، قدرت أعبر شو في داخلي. بكيت شوي، ضحكت شوي، زعلت، انبسطت بنفس الوقت يعني بهذا المشروع. بس آخر شيء يعني كلياتنا إنه آخر شيء وصلنا لنقطة واحدة إنه لازم إنه نساعد الجيل الجديد.
فنحن ما متعودين نحكي عن أوجاعنا ومشاكلنا. فقديش بتحسي إنه صرتي بدك تصلحي العالم أنت، يعني بتحكي لكل الناس، يعني احكوا عبروا كل اللي عم تمروا فيه، كتير ناس عم تمر فيه. هذا الشيء اللي تغير فيني صراحة.
وقت أنا اشتركت كنت أصلاً من عالم الاكتئاب الحاد، لكن بعد اشتركت معاهم فحسيت بالفرق، وحسيت إني يكون عندي ثقة إني نحكي مع الناس وإني نقدر نسأل، يعني خاصة الناس اللي معي حتى لو في المستقبل إني عندي مثلاً مشكلة، إذا عندي لو لقيت حد ما يقدر يساعدني نقدر نتصل بيهم ونقول لهم إن أنا مثلاً صاير لي كذا كذا، فهم متأكدة إنهم يقدروا يساعدوني. في هذه أول حاجة استفدت إني أنا نكون عندي واثقة من نفسي إني نقدر نتعامل مع الناس يعني أكثر من قبل.
بحس إنه مسموع، أنا عم بيجي كتير، عم ارتاح، عم انبسط، ما عاد حسيت حالي بصراحة يعني صفر على شمال.
حسيت بالفرق كبير يعني، وفرحت الحق يعني فرحت يعني كل ما نطلع من الوركشوب حنكون شخص ثاني صراحة يعني.
Each workshop has resulted in a kind of a piece of evidence that shows that we did come together and we did work together, and here's some evidence that this happened. We never go round in circles as such, you know. We always move further every time.
The project decide after many workshops, so what the peer support worker will do, how will they do it, what training they will receive. By that project, we have been able to identify their needs, to train support workers on these spaces.
Another core principle, I think, is around the whole idea of what peer support is and what the benefits of that could be. Because I think quite often in health services, applied health services work and other type of intervention development that we're used to as researchers in this area, we tend to look at the benefits and outcomes of the people who receive services and quite often overlook what the benefits, challenges and opportunities are for the people who are providing that. And in a case of peer support, I think we know from other research done in other areas that providing support as a peer is inherently beneficial for that person, can be inherently beneficial for that person as well, so can produce well-being and mental health benefits. If you feel you're contributing something, it's very empowering to feel not only that you can receive, but also that you yourself can make a contribution. And I think one of the issues around refugee work is often people feel they have to receive support and need things to be provided, but have very few opportunities to make contribution and for their skills and strengths to be acknowledged. And I think that's exactly what this project is seeking to do.
Esta experiencia me ha permitido conectar con mi pasión de guiar personas, acompañarla y empatizar.
peer support worker إذا يعني من تجربتي إني أنا استفدت واجد، وكانت يعني استفادتي مهمة جدا. يعني حاليا لو نبي لو عندي صديق أو أخت أو طفل يعني نقدر أنا نزيد له دعم سواء نفسي سواء معنوي، نقدر نساعده في تجربتي مع الوركشوب مع الأساتذة اللي كانوا
بصراحة أنا قلتها من قبل ولا برجع بعيدها، هذا الوركشوب يمكن هو عم يساعدنا نحن كيف نساعد الآخرين، بس ما بتتخيلي قديش هذا الوركشوب ساعدنا إلنا نحن شخصيا.
Las personas, este proyecto está dirigido a personas que vienen a este país en busca de oportunidades, y proyectos como este le quiere ayudar a adaptarse a ese nuevo entorno y en los desafíos que enfrentan en su búsqueda de oportunidades.
حب العمل يعني صراحة يعني كنت مأيسة عن الأمل، بس وقت ما جيت هون يعني صراحة يعني حبيت أشارك، حبيت أعمل، حبيت أشتغل، حبيت أطور من حالي يعني.
Tengo la increíble idea de hacerlo mi futuro profesional en lo adelante. Me ha gustado mucho y ha conectado conmigo.
So the most challenging aspect of the project is how to convince people of the idea, how to break the barriers of fear and tension, and explain the important points of the research without hurting their feelings. And we are here to provide help to overcome these situations, painfuls. It's not just to remind them of the difficult situation they have been exposed to.
I think the most challenging aspect in this project is building trust. We need to remember that we're working with individuals who are being led down on so many levels from so many people, from where they come from, all the way to the system here in the UK, people around them sometimes, by researchers as well. So trying to build a trust with them hasn't been easy, and we've been lucky to have the time to build a relationship with our public contributors, and also we have this sense of feeling of responsibility to honor this trust. I would say the other thing to consider is managing expectations. So we always have to remind people that it's a feasibility study.
We have a responsibility to make sure that we do no harm, that people who take part in the research, both the researchers and the participants, benefit from being part of the research, which is why we're using an action-based paradigm. So there's always this responsibility of caring, supporting, and really looking after people, whilst at the same time managing the fact that we've got to deliver a project on time. So there's always these tensions between the humility and compassion and relational aspects of the research, and then the scientific rigor and delivery of the project that we inevitably have to, obligations that we inevitably have to meet.
I think the most challenging aspects of this project is that we are working under a very hostile environment for refugees and asylum seekers, and we are often being questioned about how can mental health be people's priorities and focus when people's basic needs and fulfillment of being together with their own families and their legalities and issues with visa are not solved and fulfilled, and when you have so much urgency to settle your life.
I think that co-production is quite difficult. I think that we've done it well, but I don't think it's been easy. So if you have a very kind of top-down project, you bring people together, you give them loads of tasks, they run off and do them, and you don't actually know if people have interpreted these tasks in the way that the lead has interpreted them. Whereas in co-production, because everybody's so deeply involved, it quite quickly bubbles up if there are different interpretations and disagreements. And that can be quite challenging. I think that's challenging, but I don't think it's a negative thing. And I think it would if the true co-production, I think this will always happen if it's done well. So it's challenging partly also because we're not used to working in that way. We are more used to working in a hierarchical way. One of the core things that I've learned from this project is that here we paid a lot of attention into how we do the involvement, because we knew we were crossing cultural boundaries. So we spent a lot of time thinking, should it be mixed gender groups or not? And we asked the participants what they would be comfortable with. We asked the participants a lot about many things and sort of almost expected them or invited them to train us a little bit in how to work with people. And I think we could do more of that in studies that don't work across cultures in the same way, because at the moment there's a lot of focus on engaging with low-income communities and rural communities, or communities that might not have a university right on their doorstep.
I believe that it's a successful project that will open the door for many people to obtain job opportunities, and there will be a successful model of well-trained peer support worker who are able to provide services on a larger scale.
If we can reach more people, that would be more meaningful for more refugees and asylum seekers. My view of life, living to keep others alive. And I saw that how important this, I saw this view in person, how important it is to understand people more. Living to keep others alive make us happy and make us alive, actually.